What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I am back with the blonde today and with my holiday glam, which I will be uploading a tutorial for this look later on today. So today's video, I wanted to speak about self-love amongst Latinos. And this video is actually kind of piggybacking off of another YouTuber's video. A lot of you guys already know who she is, Bronny Moon. She is Puerto Rican, and I'll include the link to her video down in the description box so you guys can listen to her video for yourselves. But she talked about mixed race Latinos specifically. And let me just say, I know not all Latinos are mixed, but I would say that the vast majority are. So this applies to most of us, regardless of whether you're more European leaning or African leaning. Most of us are mixed. And so real briefly, she kind of talked about a lot of us mixed race Latinos, trying to fit ourselves into one box, and how there is also a push, I would say, especially here on this platform, to put yourself into one box. And especially here in the United States, of course, we know that there's always been this whole thing of trying to force you to pick a side or pick a box. You have to be white or you have to be black. And she basically said, like, trying to put ourselves into one box is in a way a level of self-hate, and that, we should embrace that we are a mix of different races. So I just kind of wanted to build upon that. So I think that among a lot of Latinos, there's always been a certain level of confusion sometimes when it comes to race, because of the fact so many of us are so mixed. A lot of the, light-skinned Latinos that you see, they can be, I don't know, 3/4 European descent, but most likely they have some level of African and indigenous ancestry. And then for those of us that are darker, while we may have a higher amount of African ancestry, it is also very likely that we have European and Native ancestry as well. And then the same goes for like those that are very indigenous, that are more indigenous descent. Usually they have, some European, maybe some African as well. So the point is, all of us have varying degrees of these three main mixtures. So, I think a lot of Latinos do deal with a level of self-hate. And, as we all know, looking at one side, there has always been a lot of anti-Blackness in the Latin community. I mean, this is nothing new. This goes back centuries. So the act of trying to alienate or distance yourself from that African ancestry has always been a very real thing for many Latinos. And you guys know that I've mentioned many times, Dominicans, we get attacked a whole lot for this. People always come at us for being, the Latinos that don't like to embrace that side of their ancestry. And granted, there are some Dominicans out there that have perpetuated that stereotype. So, I can't even blame some people for thinking that way, but I always stand by the fact that most of us are not like that. With that being said, though, I feel like most of us, we embrace all parts of who we are. But unfortunately, there are those that they don't embrace it, and they would rather side more with that European side of their ancestry and put themselves into the white box, even though they are not fully white people. I mean, they may be a lighter skinned or even closer to my complexion, but they'd rather say that they're white, or even if they don't say they're white, again, they side very much with that European aspect of their ancestry. And this isn't just talking about Dominicans. I mean, this goes for a lot of Latinos, and when you see these type of Latinos, especially the ones that you can tell are very mixed with African ancestry, I totally believe it is a level of self-hate, because going back again to that anti-Blackness that has been so prevalent within Latin America for so long, And so they feel like they should distance themselves from it. And they don't want to accept that it is a part of who they are. And I just wish that some of these Latinos would learn to value and appreciate that side of their ancestry the same way they do their European or their native ancestry. You know, to me, I think it's just as important. And you know, regardless of whether you're light or dark, you know, if you have that African in you, like embrace it. Like I've never understood why there's so much of like this negative I don't know, feeling attached to that African part of us. I mean, granted, I know it goes back to slavery and, you know, black people being at the bottom of the totem pole and blackness being associated with being a slave and being poor and all those things. But at the same time, I'm like, yo, we're in the 21st century. We need to leave that mentality behind, okay? Like, I don't know why this is still an issue in this day and age, okay? It is an important part of who we are. Embrace it. And so that's how I feel about that. Now, with that being said, although the European or white aspect of our heritage has always been the most prized and admired part of our heritage, I've also seen a little bit of the opposite going on, which is quite interesting. I feel like the more woke a lot of us Latinos become, the more I've seen a lot more Latinos rejecting that aspect of their heritage. And it's always the most interesting when I see very light-skinned Latinos that are obviously mainly European descent rejecting their European blood and saying that they're black or saying that they're native or Taino or whatever it is. So I feel like that is a little more complicated because I hear a lot of them saying, you know, they denounce and they reject their the slave master's blood and this, you know, it's rape blood and blah blah blah. You know, they give all those types of reasonings as to why they're now denouncing that part of themselves. And to an extent, I do feel like some feel guilted into embracing that part of themselves. And I'm not gonna lie, like me, myself, being a darker complected person, I do in the back of my mind sometimes feel like if like other black people are gonna look at me a certain type of way because I embrace that side of me. But at the same time, I feel like it's part of who I am. Like, why would I not embrace what I am? At the end of the day, I'm not a fully African descent person. I'm half African descent, and the other half is a mixture of European and some native ancestry. So to reject that would be to hate a part of myself. And the other thing is when I hear people say that, oh, it's rape blood, blah blah blah. To me, that tells me that you haven't done an extensive enough research into Latin American history. And let me just say, y'all know I don't at all try to gloss over the atrocities, okay, the Spaniards did when it comes to slavery, okay? Now granted, slavery systems were a little different throughout Latin America, but I don't try to pretend like, you know, the bad things they did didn't happen. I don't pretend to act like there weren't Spaniards out here raping and killing native people and Africans. Like, it most definitely happened, and I don't think that we should try to act like it didn't. It didn't. We got to accept that. But at the same time, that is not where our European ancestry or history ends. That was a part of it, yes, but that was not all of it. And I feel like people, I don't know if I don't know if it's that they don't know or they forget. I don't know that there was a lot of migration of European families into Latin America. And granted, some of it was promoted by the governments of some of these countries. I did a video not too long ago on whitening in the Caribbean. And yeah, the governments of some of these countries did push for Europeans to come to to these countries to whiten the population a bit. But even still, um, the point is that the blood, the genes of these Europeans ended up mixing in with the local populations, and they of course were not that was not a product of rape, and most of this happened post slavery. So, and then for me personally, knowing that I have very recent ancestry, directly from Europe, you guys have heard me say my mom's dad was a Spanish man born in DR. My great grandparents, they moved to DR from Spain. So I'm not going to reject that part of me, because I know that my European heritage is not all a product of rape, and I think for most Latin Americans that's not the case. And I just think that we need to have a balanced understanding. We should understand that yes, these negative things did happen, but that wasn't all that happened. So with that being said, I don't think that we should reject that side of our ancestry either. And again, I know it can be a sensitive topic, especially because, the white people, the Europeans, they were the oppressors, and a lot of our African and Native ancestors did suffer a lot at the hands of these people. But again, that's not the entirety of their story. And, as much as there were bad Europeans throughout Latin American history, there are also many good ones. And again, many European families that came to Latin America that had nothing to do with slavery, that ended up mixing in with the local populations. And a lot of our European genes is also a product of that. So again, to hate, or to now have this level of hate for that side of you, it is, I believe, a certain level of self-hate. So the point is, I've seen this like polarizing type of movements going on, with some feeling that you have to pick a side. And I don't feel that we should have to. I've made videos in the past where I've said that I prefer to identify with my culture, my ethnicity before my race, especially knowing that I'm a mixed race person. However, living in the United States, I do also feel though, especially for us darker skinned people and Latinos, do have an awareness though. We should have an awareness of how we may be perceived. I am aware that for the most part, I am perceived as, a Black person. Black meaning any ethnicity that is Black. But as far as how I self-identify, I do prefer to identify with my culture, with my ethnicity, my heritage, which is Dominican, because to me, being Dominican is embracing all sides of who I am. And unfortunately, there are some Dominicans out there that don't, and that more specifically reject that African side of them. And, I hate to bring light to those type of people because that is the root of our Dominican in denial, stereotype or whatever. But to those Dominicans that do that, like, embrace it. Why do you reject it? When I see these Dominicans that are so hell-bent on, like, distancing themselves from that, I'm like, you obviously suffer from self-hate. And it's sad. It honestly is, because, and again, focusing on us Dominicans, like, we have such a rich culture, which is a mix of all of these different roots and cultures. As much as some Dominicans try to act like our culture is straight up European with like little hints of African, a little hints of Taino, no, I'm sorry, but all you gotta do is compare Dominican culture to one of these cultures from Europe, and it is quite different. Okay, even comparing our culture to other Latin American cultures, again, it is quite different because of that African influence, really, if you really think about it. That is what sets us apart. But again, I feel like all aspects of it is equally as important. The European, the African, and the remnants of the Taino culture that remained throughout the centuries. So, as much as we should love all three aspects of our culture, we also have to love all three aspects of ourself. Okay. And, I feel like self-love is something that is lacking, not just amongst Latinos, but against many groups of people, especially groups of people that are predominantly like African descent. I just feel like we just need to learn to love ourselves, embrace everything that we are, and I don't know, like just snap out of this colonial mindset that so many of us are still in, thinking that I don't know, whiteness is superior, and that I don't know, we should reject that blackness, or even the the woke culture now, which is rejecting the European. And I don't feel like that's necessarily the answer either. So anyway, that was it for this video. I don't want to make it too long, but let me know your thoughts and opinions down below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.